Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today we're looking at the top 10 bizarre ways that pharmaceutical drugs change the environment. Pharmaceutical drugs are being prescribed more than ever to both humans and animals. In the United States, over 70% of adults use some form of prescription drug. It was only in the late 90s that researchers realized that these drugs could have a profound impact on the environment thanks to improper disposal of chemicals entering the water through our bodily waste. These drugs are incredibly helpful to humans, but they can have a devastating effect on the world's ecosystem. Number 10. Contaminates water. While current sewage management systems remove a lot of waste from water, there are no sewage plants equipped to filter out chemicals from drugs. After leaving treatment plants, sometimes the water re-enters bodies where we get our drinking water from. There are cases of treated municipal sewage being released into waterways all over the world. In 2002, the US Geological Survey tested 139 rivers in 30 states. They found that 80% of them contained traces of pharmaceuticals, hormones, and steroids. Many of these drugs are also found in our drinking water. The good news is that the levels aren't high and the chemicals in the water aren't harming us. However, it is a growing concern for experts, as research into pharmaceuticals in the water was started just over 10 years ago. Because of this, the long-term effects are still largely unknown. Number 9. Makes marine life more reckless. One of the most commonly prescribed medications is antidepressants, with 13% of American adults having a prescription. That makes for a lot of chemicals entering the water system through the toilet, and it made researchers curious as to how this would affect species like shrimp. In a lab, researchers exposed shrimps to small amounts of fluoxetine, which is one of the main components in antidepressants like Prozac or Sarafen. In the ocean, to avoid predators and stay safe, shrimp tend to hide in dark places. However, after slight exposure to this drug, the shrimps became much more reckless. They were 5 times more likely to go out into bright open areas. If this were to happen in nature, it would make the shrimp much easier prey, which could devastate their population. Number 8. Makes aquatic life more aggressive. In a lab, researchers introduced a small amount of antidepressants to water that housed cuttlefishes. Despite their name, cuttlefishes are mollusks, so they're similar to squids and octopuses. Researchers put a shrimp, which is what cuttlefish eat, in a test tube and dipped the end of the tube into the water. The cuttlefish that weren't exposed to the drugs gave up trying to get the shrimp when they realized they couldn't get through the tube. However, the ones that had been exposed to the drugs were much more aggressive and wouldn't stop trying to get the shrimp, wasting a lot of energy in the process. When they tested antidepressants on crayfish, they found that males exposed to antidepressants would fight longer, and mortality rates went up. Number 7. It can be devastating to zooplankton. If anything in an ecosystem goes wrong, it can cause a devastating ripple effect. One species that's a major part of the foundation of freshwater ecosystems are zooplankton. These microscopic plankton eat algae, and in turn, fish eat them. If their numbers are depleted, algae would overgrow and fish mortality rates would go up. So a researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison performed a number of tests on Daphnia, a species of zooplankton. She put the Daphnia into water with environmentally relevant concentrations of a cholesterol-lowering drug as well as 5 common antibiotics. At first, she subjected the Daphnia to one drug at a time. She found that with the antidepressants, the Daphnia had more offspring. When exposed to antibiotics, the Daphnia lived longer. Both would upset the amount of zooplankton in an ecosystem. But when exposed to the mixture of the antidepressant and the cholesterol drug, she found that 90% of the plankton died. When they did have offspring, they were mostly female and mostly deformed. The cholesterol drug didn't really have much of an impact on its own, but when mixed with just one other drug like it would be in nature, it was very destructive. Number 6. Feminizes marine life. Hormonal contraception, a birth control method, adds estrogen and progestin into the user's body. After the body uses the estrogen, it leaves through waste. So while hormonal contraception is helpful to humankind, it can be devastating to ecosystems. A researcher at the University of New Brunswick added a little bit of estrogen to a test lake. Shortly after, male fathead minnows started to develop eggs. Due to the feminization of the minnows, their population plummeted to just 1% of what it was before. The lake trout, which ate the minnows, had their numbers drop as well, while insects, the minnows' food source, had a population increase. When the estrogen was removed from the ecosystem, the population of minnows replenished to the numbers that they were at before. Number 5. Contaminates soil. It's believed that hundreds of millions of farmers around the world use human sewage for fertilizer and wastewater to irrigate crops. In fact, more than half the treated sewer sludge from American waste facilities is used as fertilizer. The US Geological Survey did research on soil after it had been fertilized. They found traces of pharmaceuticals, cleaners, cosmetics, perfumes, and chemicals from soaps. One of their worries is that these traces didn't stay on the top layer, but could be found as far down as 7 feet below the surface. When chemicals get this low, they can infect water sources, which can add even more chemicals to already contaminated drinking water. Number 4. Alters plant growth. With 30 million prescriptions written every day, diclofenac and ibuprofen are two of the most widely used drugs in the world. Researchers at the University of Exeter wanted to see how traces of these painkillers affected the growth of different plants. They found that the drugs affect vegetables in very specific ways. For example, when radish roots are treated with diclofenac, they have growth problems. Ibuprofen, on the other hand, has an impact on the early development of the roots of lettuce plants. It's important to note that this is preliminary research, and the study used one drug at a time. In biosolids, the crops are exposed to a number of different chemicals from drugs. It's still unclear what impact they'll have on crops and the people and the animals that eat them, especially when the chemicals are mixed with pesticides. Number 3. Almost wiped out 3 species of vultures. Humans aren't the only species to use pharmaceutical drugs. In the United States alone, the animal pharmaceutical industry is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. While the FDA and other federal regulators have deemed treated animal meat safe for human consumption, it can pose a far greater danger to the ecosystem. In the late 90s, 3 species of white vultures were dying off in large numbers in South Asia. In 2002, researchers did a study in Pakistan that discovered that the cause was the anti-inflammatory drug diclofenac, which was given to cattle to reduce fevers. The researchers believe that the vultures ate from the carcasses of cattle that had been given the drugs, which caused kidney failure in the birds. Diclofenac was responsible for wiping out 95% of 3 species, which were put on the critically endangered list. With such a fast decline in numbers, a number of ecological problems did emerge. Animals like feral dogs and rats, which compete with vultures for carcasses, were able to flourish. Unfortunately, they're natural reservoirs for disease. Without the vultures to keep their numbers in check, it's increased their chances of spreading diseases like rabies and even the bubonic plague to animals and humans. Number 2. Possible link to prostate cancer. Doctors at Princess Margaret Hospital in Toronto found that countries with high rates of women using oral contraception also have men with a high prostate cancer mortality rate. But they didn't find a significant link with other forms of contraception like condoms. Also, there was no difference between rich and poor countries. The pill is the cheapest form of birth control, so it's used around the world. Now, raises in hormonal levels being linked with cancer is certainly nothing new. The researchers believe that while only a small amount of estrogen is passed into the system via urine, there are so many women that have taken birth control since the early 80s that it's caused low-level environmental damage to both food and water sources. However, the researchers also pointed out that they're not sure exactly what the cause and effect is, and they don't want to encourage women to stop taking the pill. Number 1. Antibiotic resistance. Many people are becoming more resistant to antibiotics. This is especially true in places like China and India, where most antibiotics are produced. These facilities don't exactly have the highest standards for waste disposal, and chemicals from drugs get into drinking water. Livestock and fish then ingest this water, and then we eat them, and this builds up more of a resistance. Since the discovery of penicillin in 1928, 100 classes of antibiotics have been discovered, but no new compounds have been found since 1987. Bacteria are constantly evolving to resist antibiotics, which means we're quickly running out of effective antibiotics. It's thought that having antibiotics in the water is only speeding up the process. Resistance to bacteria is already becoming a big problem in Europe, and scientists believe that it's only a matter of time before we live in a post-antibiotic world. At that point, even common infections could become deadly. So I really hope you found that video interesting and informative. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, over there on the right are a couple of other videos that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.